What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Daily Fantasy Digest Podcast, the all-inclusive podcast where we talk all things fantasy sports to help give you an edge. I am your host, Joe Bewer, and I am joined with a very special guest today. I have the Director of Baseball Products at the Quant Edge, Mr. Drew Crawford. How's it going, Drew?
Hey Joe, hey, nice to be on with you. Looking forward to talking some baseball.
Yes, sir. We're going to be breaking down the main slate on May 4th. It's a Saturday slate. Believe it's about 7 games, and it looks to be pretty jam-packed, and there's a lot of good pitching options and bat stacks to have. So we're going to go ahead and break down cash game options, GPPs for both pitching and bat stacks. So let's just jump right in it. Top cash option for you, Drew. You're looking at this slate. What are you going with?
It's an interesting slate for pitching because we have a pretty good mix of guys that are well-known commodities versus guys who are kind of coming out of nowhere, coming back from injury. The two top guys in terms of talent have to be Patrick Corbin and Zach Wheeler, but both of those guys have some pretty tough matchups. Corbin has to go into Philly and face the Phillies there in Citizens Bank Ballpark, which is a great park for hitters on the road there. Zach Wheeler, who didn't look as great as he has his last time out, has to go into Milwaukee and face a great Brewers offense in Miller Park, another great park for hitters. So those two guys, I'm not looking to force them in cash. If we're looking at pure talent as far as firing up a guy who we can count on to have good stuff and probably get us a quality start, those guys are it. But their salaries don't quite match up with who they have to face in terms of the opposing lineup. So who I'm looking at here is a guy in Rich Hill for the Dodgers who gets to go into San Diego, pitching a great pitcher's park, coming back from injury. He looked great. His curveball looked like it was back. If you want to spend some money, he's the guy that I think is probably the most safe point per dollar. And then another guy I'm looking at is Chris Bassett for the Oakland A's, who through 2 starts has just looked tremendous with a 0.75 ERA and 16 Ks in 12 innings. He gets to go into Pittsburgh and face a National League team with no DH, another pitcher's park. And his price is going up a little bit, but it's not going to be quite indicative of his production to this point.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to touch on Chris Bassett as probably my top play for pitching, to be honest. The matchup is sweet. His stuff has looked incredible, and it's just the upside for Ks that he has is so substantial that it's quite hard to fade. Somebody else I do want to note, not necessarily the greatest matchup because they are playing in Mexico, but I think if you were looking to for a GPP pitcher, you could look for Wade Miley on the Astros. 3.24 ERA on the season. I know the over-under is set at 9. Houston is favored. Angels have been hit or miss this better part of the season, but I would say that Wade Miley, just on recent matchups against the Indians, where he struck out 7 and only allowed 2 runs, he's somebody you could look for in a GPP just to be able to get some of those bat stacks in.
Yeah, for sure. I like Miley more so as a real pitcher. He's a very good real life pitcher. The strikeouts are going to catch up for him, though. He could be a fantasy asset as well. One thing to note there in Mexico is that ballpark plays really small. It's kind of like Coors Field Light. The over-under I see on my end is already up to 9.5 from 9. So just keep that in mind with Miley. But yeah, in GPPs, anything goes. And just to touch on Bass again real quick, I would say he would be my 1A to Hills 1B with salary included. You know, with Bassett a little bit cheaper. There's a lot of hitters that we want to be able to access tonight.
I agree, and I definitely think a game that you want to target, 2 games in particular, actually 3, if we're counting the Rays game. Pitching for the Rays is undecided yet because I'm sure they're probably going to go with one of those 1-inning pitchers to start off and then pitch, whoever, Ryan Yarbrough for 6 innings, something like that afterwards. But I do really like Arizona Diamondbacks and Rockies. Coors Field is always a great place to target. Colorado is favored. Very little, but the over-under opened at 10.5, so this is a game that I definitely want to stack, and I think I want to stack the Diamondbacks in this. Kyle Freeland has just been just average at best this season. Not to say that Luke Weaver is any better, but I think you could definitely target some of these Diamondbacks bats. Their prices should be and will be priced appropriately per the matchup and the ballpark factor, but I think Ketel Marte, Adam Jones, Christian Walker, Wilmer Flores, or it could be a potential stack that you could look for. And then going into the Rangers game, I think Joey Gallo is almost an absolute lock no matter who you put at him. Over under at 10.5. Texas pretty favored in this one. So I like the Rangers here. I like Elvis Andrus. I like Nomar Mazara, Shin-Soo Choo. I love them all from both of these games.
Yeah, I'm with you there. With the Coors game, that would be one spot where I would recommend either going all in on it or just completely fading it. Freeland's had a little bit of success at Coors Field in the past. He's more of a ground ball pitcher, and as we know, the thin air of Colorado doesn't matter if you're hitting balls on the ground. And Luke Weaver has looked better this year, but he's a guy that can kind of fall apart in a hurry. He kind of pitches with emotion, and sometimes that can be good or bad. So if he goes into Colorado and gets lit up early, we could see things snowball on him pretty quick. But yeah, with Toronto opposing Texas, we don't know at this time who's going to be starting for Toronto. But if they call up somebody for a spot start, maybe bring back like a Sam Gaviglio or somebody like that who started some games for him last year, I think this lines up as a really good spot for the Rangers, like you said.
Yeah, and I think you could also potentially target the Blue Jays on the flip side with this. Lance Lynn has not looked as Lance Lynn-esque as he used to. I think this could be a game to find some value in, potentially Vlad Guerrero or Randall Grichuk, people like that, or Freddie Galvis, who usually leads off. You could find some value there to go against Lance Lynn.
Absolutely. And then one more offense that I think is in a good spot again is that Tampa Bay offense.
Yep.
In Camden Yards against the Orioles. Dylan Bundy's 0-4 with a 6.67 ERA. You got a fly ball pitcher at home. I'm in Western Maryland. It's the air's pretty thick and humid here, so the ball's going to be flying out of Camden Yards. And Tampa Bay was very popular Friday night for good reason against everybody's favorite gas can Dan Straley. So probably looking at them being one of the more popular options as well again tonight.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to be a cash game option. To be honest, Dylan Bundy 0-4 with pretty much a 7 ERA. He just literally throws just meat down the middle, and it's to the point where you could use people like Tommy Pham, Brandon Lowe are going to be in play, Mike Zunino. It's going to be a team that you're going to want to stack. Keep in mind that the Rays pricing is starting to hike. Last game, Rays Tampa Bay, Tommy Pham was priced $5,000. Brandon Lowe was $4,800. Mike Zunino is reaching $4,000. The prices are reaching up there, so it's probably going to be one of the more pricey stacks. But it could pay off in the long run. And the last stack that I do want to talk about when we were talking about Mexico, I do think that the Astros are going to be a slept-on stack tomorrow. Saturday. I think you can definitely look at anybody, George Springer, Bregman, Gurriel, Brantley against Trevor Cahill, who's 1-2 with a 6 ERA going into, like you mentioned, a humid, hot, small ballpark that is just going to cater to hitters.
Yeah, I agree with you there too. Cahill's very susceptible to left-handed hitters, and as we know, Houston has a lot of right-handed power with guys like Altuve and Alex Bregman, George Springer, but they do have some guys from the left side who can swing, and Michael Brantley, Josh Reddick. But I also wouldn't be afraid to target these righties here as well. Cahill's very susceptible to the long ball from both sides of the plate, just especially left-handers. So I agree with you there. Houston is always tough to stack just because they're always so expensive, and they run out the same lineup pretty much every day. So
yeah,
we don't get too many like spot starters from them where we get some value creep in, but who knows? Maybe the long trip to Mexico, they'll throw in some of their fourth out, maybe like a Tony Kemp or something to lead off. That's always great when that happens.
Yeah, I definitely think that's more of a GPP stack. Just to wrap this up really fast, since we talked about everything, kind of where we're at tonight. Let's just roll top pitcher of the slate. SP1, locked him in. Who are you going with?
I got to go with Chris Bassett with price considered.
Agreed. Definitely agreed. And now let's say bat stack, who you're going with, feel most confident with for cash games. Where are you looking?
Cash games, I like Tampa just with that hitting environment there. And Houston, if you can fit them. And for me, you got to think here strategy-wise, how popular Coors Field, how popular is it going to be? I'm more thinking that these are a little bit better pitchers for me, and I'm going to reserve that maybe for one of my GPP interests. But overall, my personal strategy is going to be to try to stay away from Coors Field tonight as
Yeah.
much as I can and load up on some of these other hitting environments that are almost as favorable.
Yeah, I agree there. I definitely think when you were mentioning that you either go all in on cores or you don't go in at all is a really great strategy. I think that for me personally, the Rays, I'm a big fan of Austin Meadows, but obviously he's not in right now, so he wouldn't be used. So that kind of makes me like the Rays more because you get more opportunities from the other bats. But I would have to say, in my personal opinion, I think the Rangers are going to be hot tomorrow, and I think they're actually going to be overlooked because you have that matchup with Dylan Bundy, and they are uncertain with who's going to be pitching for the Blue Jays. I think that the Rangers could be a slept-on stack for cash games, especially with how expensive players like Joey Gallo and Nomar Mazar are actually getting because of their recent hot streak. So yeah, that would probably be. I think the Rangers are going to be hot tomorrow.
For sure, I agree.
Alrighty, well that pretty much sums it up for this slate breakdown. Wanted to keep it short and sweet for everybody. Kind of go into who we feel for pitcher and bat stacks. Obviously, the Rays is a no-brainer with Dylan Bundy, and Coors is either all in or not. But I think tomorrow you could potentially see a pitcher's duel in Coors, and I don't think people are looking that closely into it. Weaver and Freeland aren't as bad as people bring them out to be. So it's going to definitely be an interesting. It's going to definitely be an interesting slate to play. So if you are watching this and you do want to go ahead and get more information, more in-depth analysis, statistics, stuff like that, I would recommend Drew's company, the Quant Edge, expert content optimizers and groundbreaking tools. They cover it all for your MLB, DFS, and betting needs. They do have a promo code right now. If you use TQEMLB, you get $25 off your MLB DFS season or $19.99 monthly package for all sports for the first month, or a 5-day $5 trial that you can go ahead and use. Now, if you enjoyed this podcast, please, by all means, go ahead and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and subscribe if you're on Apple Podcasts to stay up with all the latest videos. I want to go ahead and thank Drew for coming on the podcast this time and helping us break down this massive Saturday slate and giving us his insight. So, Drew, I thank you for that.
My pleasure, Joe.
And I can suspect we'll probably see Drew on this podcast a few more times, helping me break down some MLB content. So, with that being said, we'll see you guys next time.